Hello, hello. How are we doing? Okay, good. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Dr. Kimbrough, for having me here today. You gotta send me that pic. Okay, thank you. Yes, my name is Christina, Munoz, Madsen, whatever you want to call me. I have lots of last names. Thank you so much for having me here today. I want to always first start by a couple of disclaimers. First of all, I was a broadcast journalist for years. Your parents maybe watch me, maybe grandparents, I don't know. And I usually have somebody in my ear telling me when to stop talking. So feel free to give me a rap if I get going too long. I talk for a living. So here we go. And Dr. Pitchford's class, so sorry, you already heard a lot of this. So I know if you're going to fall asleep, totally fine. I understand. So also, I have never shared my story in its entirety without getting emotional. So I am prepared. So I just ask that if you find something funny, you laugh. And if you find something sad, you cry, because crying alone is really, really sad. So please cry with me. Is that okay? Okay, maybe today's the day I don't, but I am prepared just in case. So I have a lot of fun with people when they say Munoz, and they say, where are you from? And I know what they're getting at, and I say South Dakota, because that's not going to answer their question. Not a lot of Hispanics in South Dakota. But my dad was from South Dakota. Munoz is my mother's name. She was born and raised in Chile. Anybody been to Chile? It's the long, skinny country. Yes. We actually just got back Sunday from a trip to Chile. We hadn't been in almost 14 years, and I got to take my daughter. So incredible opportunity. My dad was a professional violinist all his life, and I call it such a God-given talent. He was born into a family of scientists and chemists, and when he was 10 years old, he saw a violin and felt drawn to it, and I love that because I'm so thankful my grandparents said yes. They got him a violin. He played in the South Dakota Symphony and the Sioux City Symphony for 44 years, taught grades 4 through 12, and we all played as well. So I love that about him. He got his music degree from Yankton College. And you know how some parents want you to go to college where they went to college, right? Kind of the legacy thing. Yankton College is now a prison, so my dad said, please don't go to the college that I went to. They turned it into a federal prison. It's a beautiful prison. And he then got his master's in music from the University of Kentucky in Louisville. And that's where a friend of his there said, hey, I just got back from the Peace Corps. I think you would really enjoy it. And he decided to join the Peace Corps. I love when you think about peacekeeping missions. His assignment was to teach music at a music conservatory in La Serena, Chile. That is where my mother was taking ballet and piano at the same conservatory. They met, they married. This was in 1969. And we go visit, and we always say, gosh, it's so beautiful. You have mountains on one side, ocean on the other. How did you ever leave? Well, for the history buffs out there, in 1971, the government was overthrown by the military in a military coup. It was a very unstable time. You won't read about this on the internet because it didn't happen. But for my family that was there, Pinochet would set curfews, and if you were not in at that curfew, they would come and shoot in the streets, and then they would come pick up the bodies. And I still remember seeing a bullet lodged in the piano of my mother's best friend, Lucia, that had gone through the window. So when you think about opportunity and raising kids and having a family, I think you're always going to choose America. And we joke about my mom probably based America on what she saw on TV. So maybe New York, LA, not South Dakota, and not in January. Actual temp was 29 below zero the day they moved. She spoke no English and said she cried for 6 months straight. So we always said she must have really loved my dad to pick up and move like that. So here we are, all these years later. I'm the youngest of 3 girls, Carolyn, Catherine, and Christina. Everyone always asks, is it K's or C's? We are CKC because it's the Spanish version. It's Carolina, Caterina, and Cristinita. I'm the baby. I'm still the baby, and they call me that. We grew up in what I call an artsy-fartsy family. So we are singing, we are dancing, we play. One of my sisters switched to cello, so we had a quartet. We played at weddings, we played at events. This is what we did. So when I'm looking for college, I'm pursuing musical theater degree. And I chose the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. And I always said if Broadway had been my dream, I might still be chasing Broadway. But my dream was a dinner theater called Chanhassen Dinner Theater outside of Minneapolis because I'd seen every show since I was 5. This is what we would go and do. And so I got invited by a friend to go to audition for community theater. I said, sure. It was cabaret. And we did the show. She actually didn't get in. I did. They needed dancers, not just singers. And the choreographer of that theater was the choreographer of Chanhassen Dinner Theater. So that's always great about networking and connecting, I like to tell people. So at the end of the show, I'd say over 200, maybe 250 dancers auditioned for Chanhassen Dinner Theater. They were going to take 8, and I got in. And let me tell you, I thought I had won the lottery. This is my dream. I am so thankful I stayed in school. I don't know why I stayed in school. I could have said, I'm doing the professional theater thing, but I stayed in school, changed my schedule because we had Wednesday matinees, and so I had to make time for that. So the show was Can-Can. This is back when it was illegal to do the Can-Can in Paris, and by Cole Porter. And we counted one time. We did 98 kicks a show, 8 shows a week, 302 performances of the same show. And I went, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. It was hard. There were lots of injuries. Hip rotator cuffs were going out, knees. We're in 3-inch heels while we're doing all these kicks. It's also the full-time salary is less than the poverty level of Minnesota. That's just the theater industry. And I missed every single holiday that year unless it happened to have fallen on Monday. Mondays are our only nights off. We had a performance every single other day, including Christmas, New Year's. It's a crazy industry. Clearly, I am all for it, but it wasn't something that was for me. Singers and actors can do it for a long time. Dancers retire at a young age, 25, 30 if you're lucky. And I saw my dancer friends go back to school or become a flight attendant or all these different things. And I wanted something where if I worked hard in the beginning, I could work my way up versus peaking and coming down. So the only other thing I had done that I really loved was radio. Oddly enough, Tom Brokaw is from Yankton, South Dakota. I don't know if any of you ever saw Tom Brokaw back when he was doing the news. My sisters and I all got to work at the same radio station that he started at. We played records, because yes, we're old. And we got to choose the music. It was adult contemporaries and oldies. I got to read the news. I got to read the weather. I got to read sports. And I enjoyed that. My sister went into management and now actually owns that radio station that we all worked at. And so I switched my degree to broadcast journalism. I kept performing full-time, teaching dance on Mondays and Tuesdays. And then I would go to the journalism school and the broadcasting. And I really started to like this aspect of it. And we actually ended up making this big life decision in Chile. We had a wedding in Chile for all of my mom's family. And I remember my broadcast advisor said there's a job at the CBS affiliate, which was called WCCO. So all the TV markets are numbered 1 through 210, okay? So number 1 would be New York, 2 would be LA, 3 Chicago, all the way down to a small town in Montana. And Minneapolis is a market 13. It's 15 now. It's a big city market. She said they need a production assistant. I think you should take this job. So when I got back from Chile, I either could have taken the job or I could have auditioned for the next show. And oh, by the way, the production assistant job schedule is 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. That's just TV news. And so I thought about it, and I decided to take the job. So I would go to WCCO from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. Then I would go to school and classes that I had. Then I would teach dance in the nights and perform on the weekends. It was crazy. I'm also slightly narcoleptic. I fall asleep when I'm talking easily, so I'm tired. And so it wasn't very smart. But I knew I had to start at the bottom. I mean, that's just the way it goes. Foot in the door job, start the networking, and I loved it. Production assistants do whatever need to be done. If the anchors need scripts, if the anchors need coffee, they do whatever needs to be done. I was there working when 9/11 happened, and this had a huge impact on me. So my shift is ending when that first plane goes into the building, and I'm going to be honest, news people are kind of crass. We see death and destruction on a daily basis. We barely even flinch. That's a big story for New York City. We're just going to keep doing our thing. When that second plane hits, there is a moment of silence in that newsroom, and we all know that we are under attack. This is not a New York story. This is an America story. Minneapolis had an election that day, and they had to decide if we were going to continue voting or not. They decided that they would. And so I stayed and helped. We had to bring our governor on. We had to bring our mayor on in between all of the national news that was going on. And you got to remember, we didn't have these phones. If you wanted to know what was going on, you had to tune into a TV that day. And I felt like I was a part of educating the public, informing the public, and I loved it. And that is what made me decide to go down the road of broadcast journalism. So when I graduated, I took a job in Duluth, Minnesota. So now these markets over here, Duluth is market 136. It's a small market. It was a beautiful location. It's off Lake Superior. My husband is a rock climber by trade, and the rock climbing is really cool because you get lower down and have to climb up and see cliffs. We really loved it. And so we had no intention of leaving. And I love how God works, even before I was aware of him, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But here we are in Duluth. I had loved it. I got a job offer in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Now, Green Bay is a middle market, 68, I think, at the time. And I laugh because it was really hard to get a job in broadcasting back then. It's not the case anymore. Back then, an average of 200 VHS tapes would be sent to every reporter opening, and a news director would watch that tape for 8 seconds before pushing eject. So it was hard to get a gig in reporting. So I didn't want to say no to this Green Bay gig, but I'm a Vikings fan. Green Bay is going to hate me because they're all about Packers. It's flat. My husband's a rock climber. That's a concern. And so I wasn't sure what to do. So this is where I talk about networking. I picked up the phone and called the anchor in Minneapolis and said, where did you work your media market job? Her name is Randy Kay. She's now on CNN, Anderson Cooper 360, and she said KATV in Little Rock, Arkansas. I said, okay, well, they don't have any openings, but I'm going to send them a tape. And she said, I'll make a call on your behalf and tell them to watch that tape. My news director says the week they got that tape, some of you older folks in the audience might recognize these names, is the same week that they were moving. Scott Inman was the weekend sports anchor. He was going to become the news anchor. Justin Akery, who was also in Duluth, he's from Iowa, who's now on the Buzz Radio, was going to become a weekend sports anchor, and voila, there was a news reporter position open. So he had my tape. He had a good recommendation. They bring me down. Never been to Arkansas. Didn't know anything about it, and they offered me a job, and so we get back, and Dave was managing a rock climbing gym, my husband, in Duluth, and we flipped the calendar. It was April 2003, and there was this beautiful rock climbing shot, and it said the Ozarks, Arkansas. They've got climbing, they've got a reporter job, we're moving to Arkansas. It was April 15th, it was tax day, so I remember it. It was blizzarding and sleeting in Duluth, and we packed up the U-Haul and came here, 75 degrees and sunny. What a welcome. We had walkie-talkies back then, because this is before we're texting like crazy on the phones, and we're driving, and I remember saying, there's big fans on the golf courses up here. It must get hot up here. We had no idea what we were in for. Talk about a change. I start working, and I can't even understand the gal that's behind the desk. She's got such a southern accent. She's now one of my best friends. And I'm thinking, I can barely understand him. It's way too hot. And I always thought, if my mom can go from Chile to South Dakota, I can go from Minnesota to Arkansas. So we're going to be okay. We were going to live here 2 years tops. That was 2003. So this is the part of the story where I like to share that I grew up going to church every Sunday, okay? It was a small church. It's very similar to Lutheran or Methodist. It's called United Church of Christ Congregationalists. It's not like Church of Christ here. I didn't realize how small it was until later. But we never talked about God outside of church, and we never read the Bible, that's for sure. It sat on the shelf getting dusty. But we showed up every Sunday, brought a casserole, and went to church. That's what it was. It was social for me. So when I went to college, it was really easy to turn away. For whatever reason, the theater industry was very anti, and a lot of atheists or agnostic, and it was easy for me to just turn away and kind of make fun of it like everybody else was. I called myself a C&E Christian, where you go to church on Christmas and Easter. And that's about it, because I would come home. So when we got here, let me tell you, Bible Belt, it's a little different. Lots of people coming up to us in the grocery store saying, have you all found a church yet? And I would always just smile and say, we're still looking, even though we weren't. Had no interest, and I worked Sundays anyway. I mean, that was the weekend shift of the reporter. So we carry about our business, and about, I guess, a year after I moved here, I get one of those phone calls that everybody dreads where my dad says they found some cancer. And it's so funny that I remember before I hung up, I said, does that mean you have cancer? And it's a really dumb question, of course. But I believe our bodies are not equipped to take bad news usually when you get it. It's a little bit of shock. So he decided to go through the treatment. It's a rare cancer called bile duct, the duct that carries the bile from one place to another. And we decided he's going to do the treatment, and this was when it was really hard to be far away. My whole family's in South Dakota but me. We're 800 miles away. And so we just keep going about our business. A couple of weeks later, we get that phone call. It says, your dad's in the hospital. You need to get up here. So 800 miles north, straight shot. We get up there. He gets out of the hospital, and they have found that the cancer has spread. It's over 90% of the liver, and they give him weeks at this point. So he sets us all down, and I remember it so well. He says 3 things to us in our living room. And he says, 1, he's glad it's him and none of us. 2, he lived a very good life. He played violin all his life. He was passionate about it. And 3, he wasn't mad at God. Now, that was strange. We didn't talk about God in our house. And in that moment, as a family, we decided to pray. I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't really know how to. My family in Chile was sending us saints. They pray to saints of healing, saints of different things. Okay, so there's a desperation that I'm going through of just, please heal my dad, please heal my dad, please heal my dad. It was so hard to come back. Here I am at this new job as a reporter. I love the job. So I'm working. He's up there. Well, we start to look like the prayers are working. He starts getting better. The cancer starts going down to 40% of the liver, which is now they can do radiation, and we're about 6 months later. So my dad was real big about quality of life. If you can't have a quality of life, what's the point? He wanted to come visit his daughter in Little Rock, and so he did. He and my mom got on a flight, and they came down. This is now June of 2005, and we had a great trip. We had a dinner with a lot of my friends. He got to see where we were working. We had a wonderful, wonderful time. On the way home, to get to Yankton, you got to do 2 flights plus a 3-hour drive. And he was really struggling to breathe. So my mom took him straight to the hospital. And when he gets there, he ends up being there for 3 weeks. The lungs aren't working very well. He's been very sick. And you get one of those phone calls again. I don't know if anybody remembers the ivory-billed woodpecker. I always say I hate that bird. It was extinct, and then it wasn't, because I was in the middle of Brinkley, Arkansas, doing an interview about the bird when we get that phone call that says, you need to get up here. So we pack our bags, 800 miles north. We get up there. His lung had collapsed. He was in ICU, and we get up there. It was a Friday night. Well, Saturday, he gets better. The lung inflates. I remember watching a Twins game in his hospital room. And it's so funny. I felt compelled to pray with him, and I still didn't really know what that was. The Lord's Prayer means a lot in my family. It is, for some reason, the first thing that my dad taught my mom in English. To this day, I don't know why. And so I said the Lord's Prayer with him, and then here comes Monday, and he's doing better. And he always said, I gave you roots and wings. Go. You love your job. Go do your thing. So Monday morning, we get in the car, and we start driving. We're about 7 hours south, so we're about an hour south of Kansas City. And we get that phone call that says, you better get back. Okay, today's not the day. We miss it by about 30 seconds. But they wait for time of death until we got there. And my mom said he was waiting for you. And to say I was devastated would be an understatement. I had never lost anyone close to me. I was a daddy's girl. And I couldn't wrap my head around not having him on this earth. And in that moment, I made a very clear decision that I would never pray again, and I would never talk to God again. I prayed for one thing in my life, and I didn't get what I wanted. And I thought, this is silly. And I lived that way for 6 months. I came back, I tried doing my job, and I'm naturally a very smiley, happy person. I wasn't. And it's so funny looking back, it was such a dark time, and now that I know that God is light, it makes sense. And so here we are around December. Well, I'm one of those people that loves Christmas. I love Christmas carols, I love the decorations, I love everything Christmas. But I'm struggling with, if I'm not doing this, I really shouldn't be doing this. This Christmas thing about some baby that I don't know much about felt contradictory to me. So I was really struggling. And right around then, some friends of ours from Channel 7, Jason Peterson, he was the consumer reporter for years, and his wife, Mary Carroll, had become good friends. And they invited us to a production at their church. It was called the Bema, which is Greek for the judgment seat. I mean, she made invitations. There was calligraphy. There was glitter involved. And my husband is the one to say, all the other friends said, no, we should probably go. They're really good friends. And they said we can go to Capers for dessert. And I said, okay, fine. I like dessert. So we go, and I had low expectations. I wasn't real into it. Well, it's a one-man performance, and it's all about the day Jesus comes back. And it portrays the story of a man that missed opportunities, didn't pray for his kids, didn't do probably what he could, and in the end, it is a dream he gets to go back and relive. Spoiler alert. So it was an incredible piece, And at the end, they gave an opportunity to give your life to Christ. And I did. It was a very clear, overwhelming feeling that I'm supposed to do this. And I'm crying and crying and crying and so emotional, but I really don't know what it means. I don't know what to do next. I'm 25 years old, and this is all new to me. And I remember Mary Carol praying over me over dessert. And then just 2 weeks later, at the time, my husband didn't get to go back to rock climbing until I became an anchor. So he was working at a water purification company, and his boss's wife was over the women's ministries at that church, and she invited me to join her Bible study. It's so funny because she always felt so bad about not inviting me earlier. And I said, if you'd invited me earlier, I would have laughed in your face. I would have said, absolutely not. But because I had gone through this transition, I said, sure. So I show up halfway through their semester, their year, and it's 11 women that we are to this day connected via text. We still get together. And I credit these women with my survival, basically, through God. And so I didn't even know normal people did Bible studies. I thought only like nuns did that. I had no idea. So this Bible study became my life. And of course, God knew this, but I didn't, that just a little bit after that, we would decide to have kids. And we would get told that we cannot have kids. I laugh because it's way more common than people think. I talk about it very openly and publicly. I was considered medically infertile, which is actually good news because insurance kicks in. If it's undetermined, then insurance doesn't kick in. So scientifically, not possible. So we go through all these different treatments. We try different things. We actually decided to do IVF and adoption process at the same exact time. My husband was adopted. So whichever one works first, great. And right before I'm supposed to inject myself with the first medicine, you have to take a pregnancy test. Well, I'm mad because I'm late for work, and the pregnancy test says pregnant, and I know that's not possible. And my husband says, what if it's right? And I'm like, no, it's not possible. So I go buy 6 more. They all say pregnant. So we have this complete miracle baby. To this day, I cannot tell you how that happened. So we go through the pregnancy. Sydney Raquel Madsen is born on October 18th, 2008. Truly the most joy I've ever experienced in my life. And 48 hours later, we had just gotten home from the hospital. My friend and coworker, Ann Presley, was raped and murdered in her home. And I have a 2-day-old baby to care for. I know without a doubt I would not have survived that without my faith. Something like that is awful. And you have the fear factor. We didn't know if he was going after newscasters. He wasn't. He didn't know who she was. But he wasn't arrested for 36 days. And I was living with the fear that something would happen to me or my baby. And let me tell you how difficult that is. And you're hormonal on top of it. It was an incredibly tough time in my life. And you know what was so pivotal for me was I was watching her mom. Ann fought for 5 days before she succumbed to her injuries. And her mom would call, and I would talk to her on the phone, and she would ask me about me and my baby and how we're doing. Everyone else is there visiting, and I'm not able to go because I'm caring for this infant. And I remember Patty just saying, it's going to be okay. Jesus has got this. That even if the worst happens, it's going to be okay because Jesus has this. And I'll be honest, that kind of faith sounded extreme to me. I watched my mom get mad at God and mad at my dad for leaving and had so much anger building up. And here I'm watching Patty lose her only daughter. And her faith is so strong, she says, it's going to be okay. Now, that doesn't mean there are days that she can't get out of bed, that she hasn't struggled extremely in this. But I saw 2 different kinds of faith that day. And I got to make a decision of which one I wanted. And I wanted this kind of faith that gave you hope in the worst of circumstances because I had never experienced that. I also know at Ann's funeral there were over 1,000 people there. I know of 3 that gave their life to Christ. There may have been more. But when you want to talk about impact in her 26 years on this earth, that is impact. And that is what really matters. So I continue on in that Bible study. And the epitome, the eternal journalist. I remember telling my Bible study leader, you know, our faith is based on one book, and I've never read it, and that bothers me. She said, okay, let's read through the Bible. So she picked out the Daily Walk Bible, and we did this in 2010. I had a 1.5-year-old at the time. And we did. We read from beginning to end the entire Bible. And it was so life-changing to me that I wanted everybody to go through this. I wanted everybody to experience this. And I started with a friend. So one friend came to me and said she was struggling. I said, let's read through the Bible. And so we did. And oddly enough, she did not end up with the same conclusion. She's still struggling with her faith, but it's different for everybody. Then I decided I'm going to share this with some friends at Channel 7. So I took 7 of my coworkers through the Bible, beginning to end. And this is where we would try to meet once a week, but it was always hard to meet. So I started sending out emails. What did you think of this? How did this reading go? Just trying to encourage them and keep them going. And that would have been the year I actually ended up leaving Channel 7. That whole idea of I'm all about my career, I'm never going to change paths, kids aren't going to change me, I was totally wrong. And I wanted to see my kids. I worked nights. I did the 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. I didn't get to see my kids. My oldest was going to kindergarten, and that's when I came to Conway. So it's been 10 years. Very thankful for UCA. President Tom Courtway brought me up here for PR marketing in the president's office. And at that point, I decided to offer it to the church we were going to at that point. And so I was teaching in the Sunday school. 42 people signed up. And I felt like, wow, I have a lot of people doing this. I'm going to start sending out more emails. So at this point, I now have an email going out about every day. What did you think of today's reading? There's one day off a week. What did you think of today's reading? How did it go? Now, just so you know, out of the 42, only 7 completed. And those stats have been very consistent throughout this. So at that point, I thought, okay, that's done. I've done that quite a bit. And then I had one friend reach out to me, which I think is so important for somebody to say, hey, are you going to do that Bible thing again? I'm interested in doing it. And I said, nah, I don't think anyone's interested. I wasn't being very obedient. When I got quiet and was obedient to God, he said, go for it. Try to put it out there. And I said, I make fun of Facebook. I laugh about Facebook. I put a lot of photos on Facebook, but I'm going to put it out there on Facebook, see what happens. 274 people said they wanted to read through the Bible. So I create a Facebook group. I'm putting out emails every day. We go through it. I decided to keep doing this. The next year, 300 people signed up. And I said I was going to do it every other year because it's really hard to get through the end of the Bible, Revelation, during Christmas. It's a little weird. So that's hard enough. And then to be putting in emails of a news system, it was just too much. So I said I'm going to do it every other year. So in 2019, 900 people signed up. So here we are, reading through the Bible, beginning to end. Then, of course, COVID hits. And everyone's like, could you please do it? Are you doing it? Because everyone's home. They all want to read the Bible. And so I said, okay, I'll do it in 2021. 1,400 people signed up. And that's when I felt called, I got to do this every year. I had people that said, when you don't do it, I don't read my Bible. I'm in the habit of reading every 15 minutes. I want to do it again. And so now I've done it every year. We have 1,500 people in the group this year. And I asked them, what's the next step? I mean, is it publishing a book? Is it a podcast? They all love the idea of a podcast. I said, okay, let's do a podcast. Now, I did get this one sponsored because it all is taking so much time. I wish this was my full-time job. I actually left UCA almost 6 years ago and started my own PR marketing firm for more flexibility with my kids. I still wasn't seeing my kids, and that's really what I wanted to do. Crazy enough, my oldest now gets into theater and dance and taking dance classes, and they needed a dance teacher, so I started teaching dance again. I now teach 3 classes a week. I do choreography, and I'm directing SpongeBob the Musical in June, and I directed Shrek last year. Had no idea I'd be back in that after a 17-year hiatus, but I love it. And I'm with my kids every day. So it's worked out great. And so I got the sponsorship from Travel with Friends. They do biblical tours all over the world. They sponsor the podcast, and I started putting a podcast out there, and we have lots of followers. I hit 10,000 listens just a few weeks ago. Been huge accomplishment, and all through God, all wanting other people to experience the Bible. And I know the Old Testament is hard, and it can be really hard to read through, but really the New Testament doesn't even have a whole lot of meaning unless you read all of this. And I always say, look at these things that we still would be doing today if that one act, that one simple act of dying on a cross hadn't happened. We would still be doing all of this today and looking like legalism and trying to do the works and trying to do everything that we could possibly do. And we don't have to do that because of Jesus. And I mean, that was so huge for me. And I just want to scream it from the rooftops and share it with everybody. And I have to tell you that first year that I was in a Bible study, it was a Priscilla Schreier Bible study, and it was talked about hearing from God. And it's so funny, it had never crossed my mind that it's a two-way conversation. I was just spoken at God and said all these different things that I wanted. And in that Bible study, they said, we want to encourage you to find a verse for the year. And let me tell you, my Bible had sat on the shelf all my life. I had no idea how to do that. So what did I do that this generation does? I go to Google, and I start Googling. Don't Google death in the Old Testament. Not very fun. Not a lot of good there. Okay, so we're going to move on to the New Testament. So I keep searching, and not sure why, but I was completely drawn to 2 Corinthians 4, 16 through 18. Therefore, we do not lose heart. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Therefore, we don't focus our eyes on what is seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, and what is unseen is eternal. And that did not become my year verse. That became my life verse. And at the end of that semester of the Bible study, they asked me to share 30 seconds. And it's so funny. They see me as a broadcaster. I'm always speaking in front of people. And I was shaking from head to toe. I've never shared something so personal in all my life. So as they were literally holding me up, and I share my story about losing my dad, and I share my verse, and then they had flown in a speaker from I don't remember where, and she comes up on that stage, and she begins to present, and she is presenting on 2 Corinthians 4, 16 through 18. If that's not a confirmation of a life verse, I don't know what is. And that has forever been my life verse. And what I love to share and point out is that you remember my prayer when my dad was sick. Heal my dad, heal my dad, heal my dad. Well, guess what? That prayer was answered. It was not answered in the way I wanted it to be, but who are we to get to say how we want a prayer answered? He is healed, and he is okay. And look at all that has happened because that happened. That's what it's all about. And that's what I now feel called to share, and I go share as much as I can. And I love to share one other verse because I wish everybody just knew it. I think there's some sort of misconception that when you're a Christian and you give your life to Christ, everything's going to be great and hunky-dory. The Bible doesn't say that anywhere. In fact, it says the opposite. Not only will we be persecuted, but we will go through bad things. John 16:33 is what I want to close with. In this life, you will have trouble. I'm going to say that louder for the people in the back. In this life, you will have trouble. But take heart. I have overcome the world. Please pray with me. Lord Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for your Son. Thank you for this ultimate gift that has cleansed us, has created for us a path that we did not have before that moment in time. And I want to thank you for the Bible, this living word that has survived all these years. And it's not a checkmark situation because every time I read it, it's different and new and life-giving. And I pray for everybody that's reading through the Bible, even if they've dropped off or lost out on pages. I pray for my family. I pray for my mom who continues to struggle. And I pray for everyone that struggles, everyone that turns away because they're mad because they didn't get their way or their prayer wasn't answered the way they wanted it. I pray for all of them. I lift all of them up to you. I pray for every student at CBC, every faculty member, every staff member, for all the good that they are doing here. And I pray that you continue to lift them up and help them go out into the world and see you through them. Lord, I thank you for everything. I thank you for my dad. And I thank you for Ann. And I thank you for all the good that you have given us on this earth. And I know that you'll use all the bad for good. Lord, we love you with all our heart, our soul, our mind, and all our strength. We pray these things in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.